Hey everybody, thank you for joining. This is the vice presidential debate pre-show between JD Vance and Tim Walz. This debate is going to start in 1 hour, 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. So let's go over what we can expect tonight, what will translate into victory for both of these candidates, and the trouble or advantages that both of them are going to have on this debate stage here tonight. I believe, as far as I know, for those who are wondering, this will most likely be the final test that we have in front of a national audience, the final head-to-head confrontation between these two campaigns. I find it highly unlikely that Donald Trump will ultimately revert back to his, initial decision in terms of getting back on the debate stage with Kamala Harris. Certainly not if his mouthpieces and acolytes aren't there to help him on Fox News. I mean, the last thing that I'd heard, he wanted Fox News to be there to assist him there. So let's see what's happening in the screen here. Looks like we have some buffering. There we go. Let's make it easier here. So do I think that we will see a Trump-Harris debate? Probably not. Again, unless Kamala Harris decides that she's going to allow Jesse Waters or Laura Ingraham to actually moderate this debate, which would be a massive mistake. Sean Hannity, which would be a massive mistake. I don't find it likely in the slightest that we'll see another debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Are there risks for both sides in terms of doing that? Yes, the risk for Donald Trump is that the lasting impression he gave of the American people in front of a broad audience, I'm talking 75 million people, is that he unhinged decided to scream about, let's see, I don't believe that the debate starts now, but I'm being told that the debate is starting now. Will somebody let me know in the chat if the debate is actually starting right now? Because I didn't think it was supposed to. But let's just make sure that I'm not wrong. No, I believe that we are good to go. I believe that we're good for 1 hour from now. But again, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, another hour. So we are good to go. Okay, so we do have an hour. So this will be our pre-show right now. So we are good to go. The C-SPAN feed, a lot of the feeds are going to start right now doing their own pre-show. So we're going to do our pre-show here. I don't anticipate that I'll be actually broadcasting the debate itself because, as I'm sure you know, the networks are pretty hostile to streamers when it comes to being able to stream this stuff. I don't think it's worth it to put the channel at risk. But what I will do, if you guys want me to, is to keep the channel running. I'll come here during the commercial breaks and we can kind of go over, and I'll leave the chat available too. Okay, going back to the debate, I do want to talk about the prospect of another Trump-Harris debate before I talk about what we can expect to see tonight. So the pros and cons. The cons for Donald Trump is that the last moment he would have had in front of 75 million people is that he was screaming about migrants eating pet dogs and cats, just completely unhinged, completely allowing himself to be baited by Kamala Harris. All she has to do is dangle the prospect of small crowd sizes at his rallies, and he bites in the same way that like a 4-year-old would come to a cookie. And that's a really bad lasting impression that he gave to the American people, that he is as impulsive and narcissistic as he is, able to be baited and manipulated. Think about the national security implications of something like that. So bad look for Donald Trump. The plus side for him, though, if he doesn't do another debate, is that it won't happen again. And it is likely that it could happen again. And so imagine the only thing worse than that happening to Donald Trump once is that happening to Donald Trump twice. So those are the pros and cons for Trump. For Kamala Harris, the pro of not having another debate is that the lasting impression that she'll give the American people is that she was poised, she looked presidential, and she certainly did defeat him in that debate. The con is that a lot of Americans still don't know her, and so without the prospect of another debate where she would invariably do quite well, she doesn't have another chance in the same way that Trump, everybody knows him. She doesn't have the chance to get herself in front of 75, 85, 95, 100 million people to make her case again. We also know that the more Trump goes in front of people, the less people like him. The more Kamala Harris goes in front of people, the more people like her. So having these opportunities in front of a wide audience, a wide national audience, usually redounds to her benefit. And so that's the disadvantage of not having another debate. Trump and his team obviously know that. They don't want to suffer the indignity of losing again. So my money would be on there not being another debate between Trump and Harris. Of course, I've been wrong plenty. So, that and $10 will get you a foot long at Subway. So don't take my word for it. Now, as for what we can expect tonight, first of all, I usually operate under the assumption, most people usually operate under the assumption that these VP contests, these VP debates don't usually mean a lot. I think this is different because we've seen thus far that the two debates in this cycle, I think we can all fairly say that they've been the most consequential debates in American history. The first debate between Trump and Biden resulted in Biden dropping out of the race. The second debate between Trump and Harris swung the polls. I mean, we're seeing like a several point bump now, which you can argue was going to happen anyway because of Kamala's momentum. More people get to know her, but it's certainly, we're seeing national polls showing her leading 3, 4, 5, sometimes as many as 6 points. In some swing state polls, swing state polls are everywhere, but we've seen her leading in just about all of the major averages in Wisconsin, in Michigan, mostly in Pennsylvania, in Nevada, some in North Carolina, some in Arizona, and then it's back and forth in Georgia. So ultimately, it definitely redounds to her benefit in terms of what we've seen in the aftermath of that debate, that bump on her behalf. So yes, I do think that these two thus far were the most consequential debates in history. This is also, as I mentioned before, the last opportunity that these candidates are going to have to go in front of the American people. So this is the last image. Also, Donald Trump he's not 40 years old, right? He's 78. He would leave office at 82. Not in the best health in the world. His diet consists of soda and burnt steak. So like the prospect that having somebody that old doesn't make it through their entire term is not zero. And so having J.D. Vance in there is more important than if, Barack Obama was running, for example, and he was much younger. Certainly is more important than the prospect of Tim Walz being there to take over for Kamala Harris, who's 60 years old, not 78. So I think people are going to look at J.D. Vance with a renewed focus. Also, the fact that Donald Trump does not care about policy. He has no long-standing principles, no long-standing views. He'll blow whichever way the wind blows him and wherever the most money is coming from. So, and we've seen that before. So I think that I do think that the way that J.D. Vance would govern will speak to will speak to the fact that Donald Trump then has one more person in his ear who's likely to influence his decision-making. Because again, Trump doesn't care. He has no real thoughts on crypto, on Bitcoin, on any of these things where J.D. Vance and his billionaire handlers, Peter Thiel, might want policy to go. And so in a way, you can look at J.D. Vance as a proxy for what Donald Trump will do. And that's why this debate, I think, is more important because you are dealing with somebody in Donald Trump who doesn't have long-standing principles or beliefs or values or morals or anything. Again, he is a vessel for what Republicans want to pass, and whoever pays him the most, whoever helps him the most, whoever is going to say nice things and pet him, because that's what he wants to be pet, those people are usually going to get what they want as far as Trump is concerned. So there's that aspect of this, why J.D. Vance is, I think, a little bit more of a significant figure. And look, this is there is a lot of what J.D. Vance is saying right now is going to be. I think that goes to the last point I was going to make is J.D. Vance is a bit, I think he literally wrote the foreword for Project 2025. So again, a lot of what we hear on this debate stage is what we're going to see enacted into law if Trump becomes president. A lot of what J.D. Vance espouses is going to be what's enacted into law as president. Trump doesn't care. He wants the glossy stuff. He wants the attention. He wants the praise, but he doesn't care about governing. He doesn't know how to govern. He wants to go out there and talk about how great all of his deals are without actually negotiating any deals. He wants to be able to just slap his branding on stuff because that's what he does. He says that he's the guy who owns Trump Steaks and Trump Water and Trump Wine, Trump University, TrumpGo.com, Trump the Game, just slaps his name on things, licensing deals, doesn't actually do any of the work, doesn't build them into actual legitimate companies. He just wants a quick buck. And we're seeing that in the offerings that he's giving to his supporters right now. The grift is just undeniable, and it's never ending. What's the latest thing that he offered to his supporters? I actually have it pulled up. I think it was yesterday. I promise to make America great again, this time with crypto. At World Liberty Fi is planning to help make America the crypto capital of the world. Go to worldlibertyfinancial.com. He's hawking crypto like 30 days out from a presidential election. Are you serious right now? And that's to say nothing of the fact that he's also hawking his coins, $2 bills with his face on them, hats, shirts, shoes. I know I'm missing a ton of these, and I've done this list so many times that it should be much more accessible to me. Throw your thoughts in the comments right now, because I can't remember the rest of this list at what he's used to grift his supporters right now, and I know I'm forgetting some, and it's worth going over. Even Laura Ingraham came out and she tweeted about how she wants people to go to lauralikesgold.com. I mean, the grift for all of these people is it's never ending. They are there solely to just continue turning his supporters over and emptying their pockets. Watches, the $100,000 watch. Thank you to everybody who brought that up in the chat. Bibles, a $60 Bible with the Bill of Rights and the Bible attached to them. I mean, my God. Trading cards, another good one. Pieces of his suit, another good one. NFTs, I think we mentioned that one. The sneakers we mentioned. Yeah, it's a pretty sad state of affairs. When that is what the presidential candidate, the guy who is simultaneously claiming that nobody has any money to do anything because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have ruined the economy, is also asking you for $100,000 so that you can buy a watch with his name on it. So that's what we can expect. That's what we can expect on that front. Now, in terms of tonight, what does victory look like for J.D. Vance? What does victory look like for Tim Walz? I think the name of the game here is both of them are going to have to defend or advocate for the policies of the person at the top of their ticket. I think that's going to be J.D. Vance is going to be attacking Kamala Harris. His goal is to try to tie Kamala Harris to the least popular policies of the Biden administration. Look for him to focus extensively on immigration. Perhaps he'll do it more effectively than Donald Trump did, which was to just scream like an unhinged lunatic about migrants consuming pets. But that's what we should expect to see J.D. Vance pivot a lot to, and that's him in his element, right? He is very much of the blood and soil nativist Republican, where he will very much rely on these isolationist, nativist attacks, these xenophobic attacks, which is especially ironic because when he makes these attacks, remember that at home he has an immigrant wife and 3 biracial children. So the extent to which these people will go to show that they have zero dignity as they sell their souls for Donald Trump cannot be overstated. What J.D. Vance says when he launches these xenophobic attacks to kowtow to Donald Trump, to show his fidelity and affection to the guy at the top of the ticket, he is doing that knowing full well that at home he has a wife and 3 kids who would be directly impacted and hurt by the things that he's saying and the policies that he's espousing. So it's just peak disgusting by J.D. Vance. What Tim Walz has to do is, I think what we should look out for is to show Vance as a hypocrite by tying his past comments to the fact that he is right now sharing a ticket with the guy who he himself called America's Hitler. So when J.D. Vance tries to espouse some position, Tim Walz can very effectively say, look, you don't stand for anything, much like the guy at the top of your ticket. You were out here saying that Donald Trump would be the worst thing to happen to this country, saying that the way that he lies is just unforgivable, saying that Donald Trump is the worst thing to happen to this party and that he can't be trusted and that his actions toward women are disgusting and on and on. So J.D. Vance, like Donald Trump, will just blow whichever way the wind blows him, and right now it's blowing him to the top of the ticket. He is failing up in the Republican Party in the way that these other Republicans do as well, and so I would say look for Tim Walz to paint J.D. Vance as a completely unreliable narrator here, and by bringing up his past positions, because that's what J.D. Vance purportedly actually believed. So he's either lying then or he's lying now. So if Tim Walz can land that hit, then I think that will be really effective at pretty much destroying his credibility and undermining whatever J.D. Vance tries to say beyond that. There is also the fact that I think we can look for Tim Walz to just attack Donald Trump on his record, and there's plenty to attack him on. Remember, Donald Trump left office having lost 3 million jobs. It was the worst jobs record of any president in modern American history. The unemployment rate was 6.3%. Right now, it's at the lowest stretch of unemployment that we've had in half a century. Donald Trump left office with a 3.4% contraction in the U.S. economy. Right now, we have the strongest economy in the world and the strongest stock market on the face of the earth. And so on all of these economic factors, Donald Trump presented himself as this savior of the U.S. economy, as this jobs creator, when in actuality, the numbers don't lie. Trump will, but the numbers don't lie. Trump lost the most jobs. He had the highest unemployment rate, and the stock market isn't close to what it is right now, and the economy contracted by the time he left office. So I think that they'll be able to make those cases, and then, of course, the most important case, which is that Donald Trump is solely unilaterally responsible for the fact that the Supreme Court overturned Roe and stripped women of their reproductive rights in this country, which has been a killer for Republicans in election after election after election. That issue has cost Republicans elections in places that are certainly no liberal bastions, right? Alabama, Ohio, Kentucky, Kansas, Virginia. And so Republicans lose election after election predicated almost exclusively on this issue. All the while, Donald Trump has been coming out taking responsibility for it. Why? Because he can't help but get some applause from the farthest right fringes of his base. And so whereas normally one might think it would be smart to pivot to a general election strategy where maybe you don't take responsibility for the single least popular policy passed in modern American history, but because he has people in front of them who like that policy, and because he's so desperate for some fleeting moment of adulation, just some ephemeral claps from the people who are standing right in front of him, he can't help himself but to say things that they will applaud, and then he gets that boost of serotonin that he needs, and he just goes on his way. There is no strategy involved here. It's just that he is so desperate for affection and adulation that every time he cannot help himself but say it, because because the momentary shot of joy that he gets, of instant gratification that he gets, is just too worth it for him. And so even though he is continuing to sink himself among the broader electorate, the people who he actually needs in terms of expanding his coalition, still that doesn't matter, because he is like a child, and object permanence is a thing for him, and he only sees what's directly in front of him, and he doesn't even acknowledge the existence of anything that's not right in front of him. And so if he can get the people standing right in front of him at his rallies to clap when he says that he was responsible for appointing the U.S. Supreme Court justices who would go on to overturn Roe, that's what he's going to do, because he doesn't even acknowledge the existence of people in America who don't like that policy. The very people who are going to be the ones deciding this election. Doesn't care about them. All he sees are just the people clapping like lunatics right in front of him, just clapping like seals, and that's all he cares about. The impulse control, not even on his radar in this galaxy. He wants claps. He says things that are going to get them to clap. That is all he cares about. He'll worry about everything else later. That is how his brain operates. So that will be a very potent attack for Tim Walz to seize upon. Obviously, J.D. Vance somehow is even more extreme than Donald Trump on this exact issue. You'll remember that his website actually called for the end of abortion outright. That's what J.D. Vance is looking for. So whereas Donald Trump tries to play make-believe and pretend that he's some quasi-moderate on the issue of abortion in some very low-rent, desperate effort to maybe paint himself as not as extreme as he is, J.D. Vance straight up called for an end to abortion. And that's just one peg on the stool that he has, where he is just perfectly content to wage outright war against any woman in this country. You remember that J.D. Vance has said numerous times that if you don't have children, that you are delusional, that something's wrong with you. So basically, the Trump-Vance ticket has figured out how to attack women, single people, cat owners, Taylor Swift fans. I don't know what other broader demographic you can attack than the people that Vance and Trump have decided to attack in the lead up to the election. I mean, what did Trump say the other day about Jews? He said that if he loses, it's going to be the responsibility of Jews. It's also not great, especially when Jews vote for Democrats. In the 2020 election, Jews voted for Democrats as a higher percent than even evangelicals voted for Republicans. So of every religious bloc in this country, Jews voted the most for Democrats, even more than evangelicals voted for Donald Trump in 2020. I believe that number is a little bit lower now. I believe evangelicals, as far as the latest Pew poll is concerned, that evangelicals do vote for Republicans now in a higher percentage than Jews vote for Democrats. But either way, not great to blame an entire demographic group, especially one that ostensibly you could use the support of. So, but yes, Donald Trump has waged war on pretty much every demographic, every religious, every gender group that you could possibly wage war on. And this is part of his brilliant strategy as he heads toward the election to expand his tent. And he's going to do that by continuing to double and triple down on abortion being ripped away from women and saying that you're going to eliminate the Department of Education. So, with that said, I will take questions if you have them. For those watching right now, if you're not yet subscribed, the best way to support this channel is to hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and that will allow you to participate in the chat. For those who are in the chat, if you have questions for me, just make sure to highlight my name at Brian Tyler Cohen. This way I can see them. It'll show up in orange, and this way I can answer your questions. So go ahead and throw some questions in the chat. By the way, for those asking, we are about 37 minutes away from the start of this debate this evening. Thoughts on Jimmy Carter turning 100? I think it's kind of amazing that he is hanging on, and I like to think that it is to make sure that he can cast his ballot 5 weeks from now. That's what I like to think. And we'll see. We'll see how long he's able to hang on for. But also relevant today is the fact that he sold his peanut farm because he didn't want to give the optics of profiting from the presidency. And when you contrast that with what Donald Trump does, which is basically using his Twitter account as a never-ending grift against his supporters, it kind of shows the rot that has pervaded the entirety of the GOP. Okay, we are getting a lot of questions here, so let's do my best to answer them. Who's going to walk over and shake whose hand first? I think Kamala Harris pretty much ended the prospect of that not happening because Donald Trump looked so small, so impotent by virtue of the fact that he didn't opt to shake Kamala Harris's hand. Both of them are going to go up to each other, I believe, and shake each other's hand. I don't have any doubt about that. How consequential do I think this debate will be? I do think it'll be consequential, certainly more consequential than a normal vice presidential debate, because this is going to be the last opportunity, and I mentioned this before, that Americans have to actually see the candidates in front of a national audience. As I mentioned before, I don't think that we're going to see another Trump-Harris debate. I think what happened to him at the first debate was pretty much a nail in the coffin of it happening again. And so this is it. And it'll be the first time for a lot of people that they're actually meeting Tim Walz. I mean, if you haven't watched his rallies, which he's been extraordinarily effective at, then you really don't know him. And by that same token, the more people hear from J.D. Vance, the less they like him. So I think both ways you cut it. This is going to be a big night, a big liability for the Trump campaign. But I don't want to undersell J.D. Vance because, look, this is not Donald Trump at the same token. Like, J.D. Vance does do the podcast circuit. He does go on TV. He is in the Senate, and he isn't a rambling lunatic in the same way that Donald Trump is. He has disgusting views, but he is an effective speaker, certainly relative to Trump, as low a bar as that is. And so I don't want to undersell him, but I know that on the issues themselves, J.D. Vance is a pretty deplorable figure. And so I think so long as they can keep the issues on the relevant issues facing Americans, I think that J.D. Vance has a lot more to lose than Tim Walz does. How do I see the strike affecting things? So that's the port strike. I don't know that it'll affect things right now. Hopefully there's a resolution to the strike, but I don't think that this is not something I think is going to affect us right now, but I do think that as we get closer to the election, look, it can send prices for produce, for fruits, for other goods that need to come in that aren't getting offloaded. I think it could send the cost of goods up, and that's not great, especially in the lead up to the election. But I don't know that there's enough time that it'll actually have a major impact, but it certainly is close, too close for comfort. But I don't know that they'll just, maybe we'll get a question on that tonight, but more likely than not, they probably won't discuss it. I think I'm going to just do a pre-show for those asking, am I covering the debate live? But what I will do is make sure to keep this open, my live stream, and we can pop in during commercial breaks and just give quick rundowns of what we're seeing thus far. Do I think the debate will affect the polls? I don't know. And the reason I say that is because we already saw a pretty big bump in the polls for Kamala Harris. She's leading Donald Trump in national polls, 3, 4, sometimes 5%. We have a pretty inelastic electorate, meaning there is very high polarization. There's a very narrow gap of people in the middle who are undecided right now. And perhaps for that very slim margin of Americans, they'll be looking to this debate to inform some of their opinions. But again, the amount of people in that sliver in the middle is so small that I think inherently there isn't enough to have some big bump in the polls, because there just aren't that many people left who haven't already made up their minds. I mean, Donald Trump has 100% name recognition. Kamala Harris obviously has the name recognition, but there's people who don't know what she stands for. The more people who do, again, as I've said before, end up supporting her. She has a higher approval rating by far than Donald Trump, and Tim Walz has a higher approval rating even than Kamala Harris. Tim Walz has the highest approval rating of all. So I do think there's upside for Tim Walz here. And but even if he takes all of the undecided people off the board, there's just not that many people left. So hopefully we do see a bump if this debate goes well. But I just don't think it's going to be all that big, just by virtue of how polarized everybody is and how calcified the electorate is right now. Can the Electoral College be eliminated in the next presidency? I mean, you need enough states to actually sign the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I don't know that we're that close right now. I believe we still have like 50 electoral votes to go, so unlikely, but certainly possible. Metaphysically, it's possible. What microphone do I use? It's a Shure SM7B. Let's say that Vance crashes and burns tonight. Do you think the GOP will insist on a second Harris versus Trump debate? That's a good question. It certainly is possible, because already there's a big risk in Donald Trump going out, having given his lasting image to the American people, being his ranting, raving, manic screeds about migrants eating pets. That did not help him. J.D. Vance is going to be, as I said before, better than Donald Trump. Again, a low bar to clear. But the last thing that the Trump campaign wants is not just one, but both candidates crashing and burning on the debate stage. And so I think that they'll try and they'll present themselves as what they'll do in the event that they do this is they'll say, we want a Fox News debate. Here's the date. Here's the time. We accept. And if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz don't expect, or if Kamala Harris doesn't accept, then she's running scared. And then they'll just beat that drum over and over and over and try to frame it as if she's too afraid to debate on the egregiously unfair, uneven terms that Donald Trump has decided that he needs, because he needs his big safety net. And I think that's what they'll do. But if there is the opportunity for a fair debate, another CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC debate, for example, I just don't think that Donald Trump takes it. I think that unless he has his lackeys there to help carry water for him in real time, unless it can be a 2 or 3 versus 1 with the help of like Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity or Jesse Waters. And I'm not just pulling those names out of my ass. Those are the names that he expressly said when he was opining on who he would want to moderate a debate. Unless he has those people, I don't think that he has what it takes to get up on stage. This guy is physically incapable of controlling his impulses. Like, you don't understand. When he first got on that debate stage, you better believe that he was prepped by somebody who said Kamala Harris is going to take a dig at you and say that you have small crowd sizes, don't take the bait. And he said, okay, yep. And they said, whatever you do, don't make yourself look like a ranting, raving lunatic on the debate stage by taking the bait. And he was like, got it. And then he went on stage and she was like, his rallies are boring. And something snapped and synapses started firing randomly at will. Words started falling out of his face. And he lost his mind. And so he's not able to control his impulses. And she knows how to get under his skin. And the roles can't be reversed here. He tries to do it. He tries to bait her, and she doesn't take it. What did he say at the National Association of Black Journalists? He said that Kamala Harris wasn't black. She goes on stage a few days later at her rally, and she goes, if you want to say something like that, say it to my face. He had the opportunity on the debate stage to say that. What did he do? Nothing. Crickets. Dude didn't want to say a word when he was actually in front of Kamala Harris. So even when he had the opportunity to bait her, he wouldn't take that opportunity because he knew full well that she wouldn't take the debate, that she makes him look small and impotent and weak, and he didn't want to suffer the indignity of looking that way on the debate stage. And so instead, he just balked. He just took his cards and went home because he knew he would fail. And so he has the opportunity to bait her, doesn't take the bait. Meanwhile, she baits him and he grips on again like a 4-year-old to a cookie. And so there's a lot of risk, I think, in going forward with the prospect of another debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, because again, it's not like he's going to figure out how to control himself. He's becoming more unhinged as he gets closer to November. He feels more backed against the wall as his sentencing bears down on him, as he faces the looming prospect of his 3 other prosecutions in D.C. and Georgia and Florida, where his case was currently dismissed but is going back to appeal on the 11th Circuit and will almost assuredly be reinstated by the 11th Circuit under a new judge. So all of that is to say, that is my long-winded answer. Do I think that the GOP will insist on a second Harris versus Trump debate in the event that J.D. Vance crashes and burns tonight? I don't think they can take that risk, but I also want to measure expectations here. I don't think that J.D. Vance is going to crash and burn. I do think that this is a good opportunity for Tim Walz to land some good hits and basically just show the American people that Tim Walz is creepy, that he's not a normal, likable, relatable human being, that he espouses some really draconian, disgusting views, and that he is tasked with the unenviable task of having to defend somebody who he himself had some choice words for just a few years ago when he wasn't alongside him on the presidential ticket, and who he overall just showed us who he reviled. And so that's what I think we're going to look out for tonight. I wouldn't expect crash and burn from J.D. Vance, but I would expect Tim Walz to both be likable and be able to land some good hits on him as well. Is there any chance that Project 2025 could be implemented should Donald Trump win? I don't think there's a chance. I think there's a damn near certainty that Project 2025 will be implemented if Donald Trump wins. A lot of people ask what Project 2025 is. It has some really major, like, dire consequences for abortion rights, for abortion medication, for the Department of Education. Here's the number one thing in 60 seconds that I can say about Project 2025. The scariest part, if you watch my channel, you know what I'm about to say. It relates to Schedule F employees. So when a president takes office, he has a few thousand people that he can hire and fire at will. Those are political appointees. The rest of the federal government, hundreds of thousands of people who staff the DOJ, the FBI, the FCC, the IRS, all of those people are career civil servants. You cannot fire them. They are there. They have protections, federal government protections for their jobs. They are neutral. A lot of them have worked both administrations of both parties for decades. What Trump would do is turn all of those hundreds of thousands of people who staff the U.S. government into political appointees, meaning he could fire them and rehire hundreds of thousands of people who would be loyal not to the Constitution, but to him. Think about how that would work in practice. Think about what would happen if the DOJ, for example, was staffed not with career civil servants whose, again, loyalty is to the Constitution and to the law, but instead whose loyalty is to Donald Trump. Think about, for example, if the same claims of fraud popped up that Donald Trump tried to make in 2020. Oh, the votes are rigged in Milwaukee. The votes are rigged in Detroit. The votes are rigged in Philly. We have to stop the vote and seize the voting machines. Well, of course, none of that carried any weight back when he made those claims in 2020, because we could see that those claims were litigated and there was no there. And so even Bill Barr called it bullshit. Now imagine if you have people like Jeffrey Clark, Kash Patel, Stephen Miller making up the DOJ, and they say, you know what? We think there was fraud. We have to throw away these votes in Milwaukee. What happens to Wisconsin if there's no votes in Milwaukee? We have to throw away these votes in Detroit. Think about what happens to Michigan if there's no votes in Detroit. Think about what happens to Pennsylvania if there's no votes in Philly. That is how Republicans could single-handedly make sure that they never lose an election again, by staffing the DOJ with people who validate bogus claims of fraud because they think it helps them. By the same token, imagine if white supremacist groups come by and suppress the vote in urban vote centers, for example, and don't let people go and vote in Fulton County, Georgia. Those voter suppression efforts are escalated up to the DOJ, and the DOJ under Jeffrey Clark says, no, we didn't find anything there. Nothing wrong here. Now you can have, that's a green light for all of these white supremacist militias, these far-right militias, to go and make sure that at every polling place that's minority majority, that nobody actually gets to vote, that they scare these people into voting, because we already know that the DOJ won't actually take up these claims, won't take them seriously, and so they will only litigate claims, they will only take up claims where Donald Trump stands to benefit, and they will ignore claims where Donald Trump or Republicans don't stand to benefit. That is that's not the doorstep to autocracy, that is autocracy. That's how we get there in one fell swoop. Schedule F. I know it's wonky. I know it's in the weeds. It is quite simple. If Donald Trump is able to fire everybody in the federal government, all these Schedule F employees, and replace them with political appointees, that is how he remakes the government in his mold. That is how he can ensure that Republicans have permanent rule that will end democracy as we know it. I know that people are going to hear that, and they're going to say, oh, look, an alarmist leftist screaming about how democracy is going to be ended. That's how it happens. That is quite literally how it works in one fell swoop. That is not me being alarmist. I just explained it in 60 seconds, maybe a little bit longer, but that is how it works. There's other ways that they can weaponize the government at the FCC, for example. Imagine the attacking broadcast licenses if you say something critical of Trump. Imagine litigating slander or libel or defamation cases against people like me, critics of Donald Trump when he's in office, and tying everybody up in litigation, even if they might lose those cases. Just a lot of people can't afford that kind of litigation. They can suppress dissent that way in the media. Imagine what they could do with the IRS. They can audit all of Donald Trump's political enemies and squeeze them of money that way and find some bogus claims to try these people on in court. So there are a lot of ways that this issue of Schedule F and Project 2025 can have major consequences against anybody who is a proponent of democracy. You do not come back from that. That is why Project 2025 is so scary. And that's why I try to beat the drum about Schedule F in particular, because I know there's only so much salience that's saying like, oh, they'll eliminate the Department of Education. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, I'm here, happy Tuesday, I'm here to fight for our right to defend the Department of Education in this country. That's not what they're doing. But if these people are looking at what can happen if all of the career civil servants in government are replaced by Trump appointees and Trump loyalists who are, who don't care, who have no adherence to the law, the Constitution, or the statute, but instead to Donald Trump, that's another story. And that actually is quite scary. Why can't I moderate the next debate? I can't even get Republicans to come on my show. If you think that a Republican is going to stand on a debate stage moderated by me, that's not, the farthest right person I think I've ever had on my show was Adam Kinzinger. I have tried to get Marjorie Taylor Greene on my show. I've tried to get Matt Gaetz on my show. Nobody bites. Ain't happening. Real quick, we are 20 minutes away from this debate beginning. For those who are watching right now, thank you for tuning into this pre-show. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel and you enjoy my coverage right now, or you want to support my work further, I don't ever do sponsorships on this channel. I don't ask for money. I don't do paid ads. I don't do any of that stuff. The best way, the only way to support my work is to subscribe. So if you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That's the best way to support my work. It'll also allow you to participate in the chat and throw some questions in the chat. Okay, let's get back to some questions here. Do I think that Walz will be on defense or offense tonight? That's a good question. I think that J.D. Vance is going to try to put Walz on. Look, both of them are going to try to be on offense, right? That's the name of the game. J.D. Vance's goal here is to try and weaponize everything that the Biden administration has done against Tim Walz. What I said earlier is that he's going to take the worst elements of the Biden administration, blame them on Kamala Harris, and make Tim Walz accountable for what he's decided Kamala Harris is responsible for by virtue of Joe Biden doing it. I know that's a mouthful. He's basically trying to say Kamala Harris is basically a proxy for Joe Biden, even though a vice president doesn't dictate policy. And I know Republicans love to pretend right now that suddenly the vice president is in charge of everything. I had Piers Morgan say the same thing when I was debating him on his show, that, oh, well, Kamala Harris is the vice president right now. Why doesn't she enact some of these policies? And I would love to hear what policies Mike Pence passed when he was the vice president, as if we're all pretending right now that suddenly vice president is responsible for dictating policy. So I think that J.D. Vance will try to blame any of the shortcomings of the Biden administration on Kamala Harris, and he'll make Tim Walz try to answer for that. But Tim Walz will try to do the same thing, and he has the more direct ability to make J.D. Vance accountable for what Trump did, because Trump actually was the president and Kamala Harris is not. So, and Trump does have a record that he's forced to defend, which is instead of going into office and doing what he did, doing what he promised to do, which was to pass an infrastructure law, to foster a jobs boom, to repeal and replace Obamacare and replace it with something that is more comprehensive and less expensive. He didn't do any of that stuff. All he did was pass a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. That's it. That's what he did with his political capital. He ran as a populist, but did nothing for the working class, did nothing for the middle class. And in fact, when midterms were coming around, he expressly said, if you elect Republicans to the majority in both the House and the Senate, we'll pass a middle class tax cut. Well, answer me this. If your tax cut that you just passed already benefited the middle class, why would you expressly need to pass a tax cut for the middle class again? It didn't. It's a tacit admission that the tax cut that Donald Trump passed the first time was solely there to help the ultra wealthy, millionaires and billionaires. I believe 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. That's a middle class tax cut? Give me a break. That is a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires that gave crumbs to the rest of Americans. And then, of course, he dangled the prospect of a middle class tax cut on like a carrot for people to vote for Republicans, and they never did that. They never got into office because people didn't believe them, and because they voted them out based on their attacks against healthcare. So, yes, I think I think both of them are going to be on offense tonight to the degree they can, but hopefully Tim Walz is able to get J.D. Vance on defense and answer for a lot of the shortcomings of Donald Trump. Do I think Vance will show his true creep? That is a good question. Here's the thing. I think his number one priority is to make sure that somehow he can force himself to feel relatable to people. Is it going to work? I don't know. Are total creeps able to feel relatable? Can they get coached into acting like normal human beings? Probably not. Think about the creepiest person you know, and now think about them trying to act cool and casual. Does it work? Or does it usually backfire and look cringy because you cannot make somebody who's a total creep seem normal? So no, I don't. I think that's going to be his number one objective tonight, but I don't think it's going to really work because at his core, dude is a total creep. What do I think will happen if Trump dumps Vance at the last minute? Well, that's not going to happen because ballots are already being printed. So if Trump dumps Vance, that would be a disaster, a strategic disaster for Donald Trump, considering he is stuck with this guy. As people like to say, you got to carry this thing to term. Republicans are learning in real time what happens when you are carrying something you don't want to term. How does Walz debate an onslaught of misinformation without fact-checking? This is a good question. As many of you know, CBS said yesterday, although I'm not sure if they walked it back. I don't know if there's going to be fact checks. Yesterday, I was under the impression that there wouldn't be, but I thought I saw something today that there would be fact checks. If those right now can let me know in the comments if you have the most up-to-date information as to whether the CBS moderators will or won't be fact-checking, please throw it in the comments so that I know, because there was information that came out immediately saying that they wouldn't fact-check, that it would be up to the candidates themselves to go ahead and fact-check each other if that's what they want to do. There are two different camps on this. Let's see. I'm going to start to get comments now. There's a few seconds delay between me saying that and the comments actually coming in, so let's see what people have to say on that issue. No fact-checking. I'm hearing, there would be fact-checks on the CBS website. Okay, so the website. So no one's going on the website. No one's logging on to CBS.com to see real-time fact checks. So here's the school of thought on this. The school of thought is you don't want to make the moderators characters in the debate, and you don't want to give one side or the other a reason to complain about the moderators and make it feel like the debate wasn't between the two candidates. You don't want to have a hand in the debate. If you're doing a one-on-one interview, for example, then it's more appropriate to fact check because you're not a character in a debate where both sides are facing off against each other. So I kind of understand that. I think I understand that. I don't agree with it. I think that if somebody says something that is absolutely baseless, 100% baseless, call it out. As a journalist, your job isn't just to stand there to give a megaphone to people to spew disinformation. Your job is also to make sure that you defend in some small way the truth to the extent that you can. And so I think that they do have an obligation to say something. They're not going to. It's another proof point that Republicans have been able to successfully game the refs in this country because they complained so much after the ABC debate and basically threw their little temper tantrums because they want to be able to lie with impunity, and the media bends to their will because because they view it as, oh well, half the country wants it, half of one of our two political parties wants it, so we want to seem neutral, and so Republicans always get what they want because they'll throw their temper tantrums otherwise and take their ball and go home. So I think that Republicans have learned how to game the refs in this country, and yeah, I think that that's why there's not any fact checks, even though ostensibly the job of a journalist is to make sure to convey some semblance of the truth, especially when you're in front of an audience of tens, if not 100 million people. I think that 30, 40, 50 million people are going to be watching this evening. So now Republicans have given themselves the opportunity to have a fact-free debate where the onus is solely on Tim Walz to push back on the inevitable deluge of disinformation out there. But look, I think Tim Walz is prepared to do it. If I'm not mistaken, Pete Buttigieg was acting as J.D. Vance in debate prep, so I'm sure that he had the opportunity to spew a lot of misinformation so that Tim Walz knew what was coming. He's well prepared. Pete Buttigieg is very good at this, so I think that in terms of this is an opportunity for Tim Walz to basically show that he knows what he's talking about and push back on the lies that J.D. Vance. There is a world in which it's actually more effective coming from the other candidate, and I think if Tim Walz can do it effectively, and I hope that he can, and he is a very talented speaker, so presumably he'll have no problem doing it, then it would be even more effective than if the debate moderators here tonight tried to do the same thing. So it doesn't really matter what I say. My view on this is not what's going to happen here. I think that debate moderators should absolutely defend the truth if they have the opportunity to do that. The fact that they're not going to be able to, is another point in Republicans' favor, but that's what they need to do. They need to stack the cards in their favor because they rely on this disinformation to help themselves politically. With that said, I'd love to moderate the next debate. Not going to happen. I don't think anybody would get on stage if I was there. But but this actually does redound to Republicans' favor because there is a world in which, and I actually spoke about this in this morning's video with Tim Miller for my series Inside the Right. This actually does redound to Republicans' favor because I know that if Tim Walz spends his time trying to debunk disinformation that is spewed by J.D. Vance, then the conversation stays on Republicans' terrain. In other words, J.D. Vance says something about immigration, let's say. Let's say he says the migrants eating pet dogs and cats. Tim Walz then uses his time not to speak on what he wants to speak about, not to perpetuate the narrative that he's trying to perpetuate, but instead to debunk bullshit spewed by J.D. Vance about migrants eating pets. And so now we're just hearing lies. A lot of people are going to believe it. Some people are going to hear the debunking or accept the debunking, and the conversation stays with migrants instead of Tim Walz being able to redirect the conversation where he wants to go. So this is a tactic by Republicans where if they spew enough disinformation, even if it's just to be debunked a moment later by the Democrat, well, all that time they're still staying on the Republicans' terrain instead of being able to redirect the conversation without having to worry about debunking lies, redirecting the conversation to where he wants to go, where Tim Walz wants to go. So it is a strategy. It's the Steve Bannon strategy of flooding the zone with shit, right? This is an express strategy that Republicans use over and over and over again, where it's not so much about convincing people, it is about obliterating the very concept of truth, and it's about making sure that Democrats can't get any points in because we spend so much time dealing with the gish gallop of debunking this and debunking this and this and this. That's why what Trump does when he opens his mouth and spews 10 lies at once, where do you even begin? right? And so this is a strategy that's an express strategy that's used by Republicans, and that's why it would be beneficial to have debate moderators, at least have a foundation of truth, so that we don't have to spend our valuable time debunking lies that are spewed by the right. And yet, that's the political environment that we live in. We are less than 10 minutes away here right now, so I will answer a few more questions here. For those who are just tuning in, I know we have a lot of people joining right now. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel and you're enjoying this pre-show and you want to support my work, it doesn't cost you anything to do so. I don't do sponsored ads. I don't do host-read ads. I don't do advertisements. I never will. I'll never put my content behind a paywall. I don't believe in that. But the best way to support my work is to subscribe to this channel. It's completely free, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Based on the polls, how plausible would it be for Vance to do well enough to earn back some of the voters who abandoned ship on the Trump-Vance ticket? Can it close the gap? I don't know that a VP debate, unless it's a disaster for one candidate or the other, I don't know that there's really some huge margin of people to gain here. As I mentioned before, we have probably the most inelastic electorate that we've had in modern American history. I think that's certainly a safe assumption. And so there aren't that many voters left who are undecided. I think this will help, but inherently, just by virtue of the fact that there are so few undecided voters out there, we don't, it's going to be difficult for this to have a cataclysmic impact. Let's see. I'm getting the comment, JD Vance can't dance. Okay. Okay, we are 5 minutes out from this debate beginning. Let's, so what I will do is once the debate begins, because I don't want to put the channel in jeopardy, I would just ask that you grab one of the simulcasts. I know C-SPAN is doing a simulcast. Let me see if we have,
going in this country. When JD Vance gets on.
Okay, so we have the C-SPAN feed here, but I am going to protect the channel because I know that the networks are pretty hostile against streamers who decide to stream these debates, and so I don't want to do anything to put the channel at risk, but I will keep the channel up, and during breaks, I'll come up and give my thoughts. So if you want to stay, you're more than welcome to keep this live stream open, and we can do midway updates and, of course, a post-debate analysis as well. But you're welcome to leave as well and close the window and head over. I know C-SPAN is doing a simulcast. I believe David Pakman may be doing a simulcast as well. Let me just check. I believe he is doing a simulcast. I believe he's going to be live streaming the debate. So if you'd like to watch it, you can head over to David Pakman's channel as well. And we are just a few minutes away, but I have it up here in the corner here so I can keep an eye on when this debate is actually starting, but we should have a few minutes here. But I think a few points that are going to be important to remember is Democrats should not lower the bar in the lead up to this debate. J.D. Vance knows what he's doing. He is much more adept than Donald Trump. He went to an Ivy League school and has spent a lot of time on the podcast circuit, speaking to people, honing his arguments. He is in the Senate. Presumably, there's a lot of debate happening in the Senate. He is not going to be a pushover in the same way that Donald Trump is a pushover in the sense that he can be baited like a child. So this is not going to be the easiest debate in the world. I don't think anybody expects a home run in either direction. But I think what we're looking for here is Tim Walz to be able to effectively make some hits on JD Vance, in terms of the fact that he doesn't actually stand for anything. He has said some pretty rough things about his own running mate, and yet now he's perfectly content to throw his full support behind that guy. Goes to show that there is nothing he won't do for the consolidation of power for himself. And he also has the unenviable task of having to defend Donald Trump's own agenda, own platform. And that is one where he advocated and fought for not the middle class, not the working class, but the wealthiest Americans when he was president of the United States. I wonder, can you let me know in the comments how many people are live streaming this debate? Because it does seem like there are quite a few folks who are live streaming, and maybe it's just worth it to try and test my luck and do a live stream. So if you know that people are actually going to live stream the debate, will you throw it in the comments and let me know what your thoughts are, and maybe we can just test our luck here? Okay, I'm hearing Adam Mockler live streaming. The Bulwark, I don't know if the Bulwark is live streaming the actual debate itself, or if the Bulwark is doing like a chat. Pacman is. Is the Bulwark actually live streaming it? Let's see. Maybe we'll just go bigger here. So I think what I'll do, I want to try to be responsible, so I'm gonna send everybody to a different stream, or you can keep this stream open. But I think I want to be responsible and try to protect the channel. So head over to C-SPAN, head over to Pacman, support the progressive media ecosystem, watch it on a different channel, and I will come back. I'm gonna put my Be Right Back screen on, and we'll talk as soon as there is a break. But definitely go watch the debate, support the progressive media ecosystem, and I'll protect the channel, and we'll come back here as soon as there's a break. All right. See you all shortly. Thank you for tuning in for the live show, the pre-show, and again, if you want to support my work. Then please make sure to subscribe to this channel. And again, you can keep this stream open in a separate tab on your computer or on your phone, and we can check back in during breaks in the debate. Okay? All right. Thanks, everybody, and we will come back soon. Okay. So a lot to cover right now in the short time that we have in between this break here for those who are still watching. Just a few points that I think are especially telling here. First of all, on the abortion thing, JD Vance comes out and says he never supported a national abortion ban, but he does say that he supported a national minimum standard. Hey, what's another word for a national minimum standard? If you set a national minimum standard of 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, what happens to abortion after those weeks? It gets banned. So he can use all of these rhetorical devices that he wants to try and frame himself as not advocating for an abortion ban, but honestly that's not going to work on anybody who has even some sense. Another point that I think is worth bringing up is, and this is what I think is going to be one of the most telling parts of this debate unto itself, is the moderators offered some minor fact check, just clarifying that the status of the migrants in Springfield, Ohio, is that they were legal immigrants, that they had protected status. And JD Vance lost his mind and complained about the fact that there was fact checking during the debate, and whined that, oh, if there's going to be fact checking, then he gets more time. In other words, his entire strategy, his position is predicated solely on being able to lie without pushback, to the point where if there is some pushback, if there is somebody holding him accountable for his lies, he melts down because that goes against his stated strategy. I mean, when your whole strategy is expressly created so as to allow you to lie with impunity, what does that say about the message that you're trying to send? That you are so willing to lie that when somebody blocks you from lying, somebody impedes your ability to lie, to allow disinformation to spew freely, that you then melt down as the result of that. That should, like, a hit dog will holler, right? That should be the full indication that you need that what JD Vance is doing here is not acting in good faith. He is not offering any truthful testimony here. He is just trying to lie with impunity. That is what his entire strategy is predicated on here. On climate, I think that it was one thing that I think was especially telling is a quote that we had from JD Vance, which is that we need to reshore American manufacturing as much as possible and produce as much American energy as possible. And of course that was his way to promote the candidacy of him and Donald Trump. Reshoring American manufacturing, does anybody know how many manufacturing jobs Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have created? 800,000. Does anybody know how many manufacturing jobs Donald Trump created when he was in office? He lost 150,000. So if we're talking about both of these candidates' records on the issue of reshoring manufacturing jobs, you can go negative 150,000 for Donald Trump or positive 800,000 for Joe Biden. I'm really bad at math, but I'm pretty sure I know which one of those two is bigger. And then producing as much energy as possible. We are more energy independent now than we have ever been. We are more energy independent now than we were under Donald Trump. So this notion that we need to bring in Donald Trump to produce more energy ignores the fact that right now under Joe Biden, we are producing more energy than Donald Trump himself. The worst thing, look, even I don't agree with the fact that we are creating as much, fracking as much oil as we are. Even I don't agree with this, but it doesn't change the reality that we are. I think we may have the debate back here.
New York City.
Okay, I'll catch you guys in the next break.
Eastern on C-SPAN, online at cspan.com.
I mean, what does it say that Tim Walz asked J.D. Vance point blank, did Donald Trump lose the election? Did Joe Biden win the election? And he could not answer the question. He had to equivocate. He had to waffle back and forth. He had to talk about censorship. When you were asked the basic question of whether Donald Trump lost a free and fair election, and your answer is to pivot to censorship of conservatives on Facebook, it becomes abundantly clear that you are little more than an empty vessel for Trumpism, and not a particularly compelling one at that. I think that was one of, if not the most damning moments of this debate, where these guys, where Vance, at the same time that he says that that Republicans and Democrats should be looking forward and not relitigating issues of the past, you cannot pretend that you are looking forward. You can't pretend that you're not looking to relitigate issues of the past when you refuse to condemn the blatant lie that Donald Trump continues to sow to this day. The big lie. He continues to say to this very day that the only way he can lose the election is if it's rigged. It is a continuation of the same bogus election denialist claims that he made in 2020 that he's making again now. And the reason that Vance can't deny it, the reason that Vance can't push back against it, is because it is the foundation of the Trump-Vance campaign. They know that if they don't win, which is looking more and more likely, that they have to fall back on election denialism. That is their only hope. And so, of course, J.D. Vance can't come forward and say that Donald Trump lost the last election. Of course he can't say that, because if he does, he gives the game away. Trump relies on these lies, not just to give him his ego some momentary boost for assuaging his loss in 2020, but also setting the foundation for what he's going to do again in November of 2024. He's already laying that foundation. He has zero qualms about doing it. Never will Vance admit that Donald Trump lost, because that serves as the foundation for Trump's lies moving forward. Oh, I think, was my mic maybe a little quiet? I hope it wasn't a little bit too quiet. Oh, shoot. So sorry about that. My mic was a little bit far away. I hope you guys can hear me a little bit better now. Is this any better? Let me know in the comments if this is better. If so, I can... Here. We're going to go back to the debate. Check in afterwards, and we will do a post-debate. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Wow. So, a very productive debate here. Look, I think both of these candidates had a job to do. So let's talk about whether they were able to accomplish what they set out to accomplish here. I think on just about all of the issues, but especially the last one, J.D. Vance showed that his job was to try to make some type of try to make some sense of the policies that were espoused by Donald Trump. But when he refused to admit that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, it was put on full display, and this is what I just said moments ago, that really J.D. Vance is little more than an empty vessel for Trumpism. He may be slicker, he may speak better, and he did. He isn't the impulsive, ranting, raving lunatic that Donald Trump was when he got on that debate stage. But at the same time, when it becomes clear that J.D. Vance can't come forward and say, let's see, it looks like we're having a little bit of a mic issue. Let's see if I can make my mic a little bit louder. Tell me if this is any better. I think we should... let's see. Give me one quick sec. Okay, I think there might be a little bit of static. There's probably just a loose input somewhere. Here, let's do one thing. We'll try to fix that. Do my best to get this fixed on the go here. Okay. This might be the best that I've got here. So I will do my best to. There is no background music. It might just be might just be a little hissing. There might be a loose cable. In any case, let's do this. So J.D. Vance had the opportunity to distance himself from Donald Trump, to present himself as a more serious candidate, and hopefully push forward these policy proposals that are being espoused by the ticket. But when J.D. Vance proves himself incapable of acknowledging and answering the basic question of whether Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, it becomes clear that he's just, again, an empty vessel for the same Trumpism that people had already rejected. So, the same election denialism. If J.D. Vance were to come forward and say that, for example, Donald Trump did lose the 2020 election, then the facade is gone. Then he has no plausible deniability about this idea that the 2020 election was stolen, which Trump keeps up because he has to figure out some bogus way to massage his bruised ego, and also to keep the con going so that he can manipulate his supporters into thinking that it happens again if Trump loses. So if Vance kind of gives the game away and says, no, you're right, the 2020 election was free and fair, Donald Trump did lose fair and square, then Trump loses his predicate. Then Trump loses his justification to be able to say, look, they're doing to me in 2024 exactly what they did in 2020. And so they have to keep this con going. They have to keep this bit going because Trump's whole backup plan, his contingency plan, is this. It is lying about the election results. Why? Because they know they can't win on their agenda. Or at least, look, they can win. They can win because it's going to be a close election, but it's unlikely that they'll win on this agenda, an agenda of stripping women of their reproductive rights, an agenda of pretending that climate change isn't real, an agenda of giving major handouts to lobbyists and writing a blank check to fossil fuel companies, an agenda where they strip women of their reproductive rights, an agenda where they want to turn schools into fortresses instead of actually focusing on the root issue, which is just the guns. And so on issue after issue after issue, they recognize that they are not in the majority of Americans, and so they need this contingency plan where they just pretend, they play make-believe that the election was stolen. And J.D. Vance coming forward and refusing to acknowledge objective reality that Donald Trump lost this election is all the indication you need that what he's going to do here is help Donald Trump perpetuate the same bullshit that he did in 2020. They're already laying the foundation. They've already laid the groundwork. Donald Trump is already coming out and saying already coming out and saying that the only way that Donald Trump can lose is if the election is rigged. And so the foundation is there. As far as Vance is concerned, his job was to do no harm and to continue perpetuating this completely debunked, completely bogus notion, debunked 65 times in court, including in front of 8 judges who Donald Trump himself appointed and Donald Trump's own Supreme Court, this notion that there was fraud because they need it. They have no other contingency plan, and Donald Trump needs to consolidate power for himself by any means necessary, no matter what. His own freedom is likely riding on this idea that he has to get into the Oval Office. Remember, the only thing waiting for him on the other side are prosecutions and potential incarceration, including incarceration that we might see right away from this New York criminal trial. So his freedom, his very freedom, may very well rely on the fact on getting into the Oval Office. And so if you don't think that he's going to continue to perpetuate the same ideas that he did in 2020, which was just for ego, now when his freedom is on the line, you're kidding yourself. So everything rides on this idea that regardless of these policy platforms, for a lot of these states, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance don't even have field offices. That's how focused they are on the legal aspects of this, on just trying to overturn the election results, install election deniers in county election official positions, in state election official positions. We've spoken about the Georgia State Election Board numerous times. So anywhere that they can allow themselves, give themselves an opportunity to refuse certification or try these extrajudicial efforts to install Donald Trump, regardless of what the election results are. That's what they're relying on. Not these get-out-to-vote efforts, not perpetuating an agenda that's actually popular among Americans. You had J.D. Vance out here saying that Donald Trump tried to salvage the ACA. Trump tried to gut the ACA. If it wasn't for John McCain giving a thumbs down, he would have been successful at gutting the ACA. Salvage the ACA? Do these guys have no shame? What about when when J.D. Vance was claiming that he wants to, that his solution for gun safety is just to harden the schools? That's what the goal here is, to turn schools into fortresses? I mean, and to Walz's credit, he pointed that out. I mean, on issue after issue after issue, he did point out all of these points at which, the policies that were espoused by J.D. Vance and by association Donald Trump are just completely draconian and anachronistic. When we're talking about getting back to pre-ACA life in America, when we're talking about hardening the schools because, God forbid, we actually tackle the issue of gun violence in this country, I mean, where are we? What are we doing here? So overall, I don't think anybody's going to watch this and think that, look, I think that people are going to watch this and think that both sides got their hits in, that both sides did what they needed to do. I think right now, with the momentum going where it's going, the onus was on J.D. Vance to try to claw back some inkling, some semblance of support for his ticket. I don't think he was able to do that. Especially when the lasting moment that viewers had was J.D. Vance denying the 2020 election results. It becomes clear again, as I said before, that J.D. Vance is little more than an empty vessel for Trumpism. And if people were tired of the lunacy, the chaos, and the dysfunction that Donald Trump brought, they can recognize in J.D. Vance that he offers nothing else. He offers the same permission structure for Trump to espouse the same bullshit as Trump did himself. So J.D. Vance did not accomplish his goal here, and I think that is to the Harris-Walz ticket. So we will leave it there. I'm going to do a full video rundown shortly in terms of what we saw at this debate, so I hope that you'll tune in. For those watching right now, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, I don't do paid ads, I don't do sponsorships. The only way to support my work, the best way to support my work, is to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. But again, it's a great way to support the work that I do, and this way you can tune in for future live streams and videos and interviews that I do on this channel. So thank you all for watching, thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.